something that like my parents have said to me is like, hey, you've really grown up. And I'm getting emotional. they're like you've really grown up. And
I'm gonna cry now.
Hi, welcome to Adulthood Pending Podcast. I'm Annalise.
I'm Brittany. And I'm Kimmy.
We are a podcast for college students, recent graduates, or anyone else who's also figuring out that being an adult isn't as simple as it's made out to be. Join us each episode as we share how we are navigating our careers, postgrad lives, and the whole adulting experience. The episode that you're about to listen to was recorded in 2 parts. The first part was recorded a couple weeks ago before the presidential election, and the second part was recorded on Saturday, November 7th, 2020, the day that we learned the results of the presidential election.
Today's episode is going to be a little bit more serious as we're going to be discussing politics, how we've navigated difficult conversations with family members, our experiences of discussing or not discussing politics in the workplace, and how our own personal background has informed our political beliefs. To start off with, we're going to start with another fun question. So, as I mentioned, this episode is going to be about politics. And while this might not be political, but while it is controversial, I'd be curious to learn your unpopular opinions.
So my unpopular opinion would have to be that I think it is okay, if not, should be mandated. Christmas decorations should be up in as early as September.
September? Oh my
Wait,
goodness.
okay, follow-up question though. When should they be taken down?
Oh, definitely before New
July.
Year's. No.
Before New Year's, really?
You don't want
okay.
it's just like, broken promises when you just see that Christmas tree and it's not Christmas.
Oh my God.
It's just like what could have been, but it's not. Like, I think the saddest day of the year is December 26th.
Is that when you take everything down?
No, but you no, because I'm usually lazy, but I like it down as soon as possible because I just don't want to see my reminders of Christmas, of what it's not anymore, the good times.
Is that why you like them up, or you think it's okay to have them up in September? Because
yes, most definitely. I love, like, in Target when they put up school supplies and there's just this one row of Christmas lights. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh my gosh,
So,
yes.
I'm just like, bring that baby out, Christmas. Sorry.
Wait, I wanted to touch on what Britt said.
Okay. Oh, Kimmy has so many thoughts on this. All right.
Roast me.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
roast
first,
me like a chestnut.
So just to comment on what you said, Britt, I don't know if you've seen this, but like, I think I read something like consumers or just people in general are putting up Christmas decorations earlier because of COVID. Like, they want to get in the holiday spirit at a quicker time.
Kimmy, I thought you were gonna initially say, like, call me like consumer capitalist. I was like,
yeah,
we're gonna go in that direction.
Okay, my unpopular opinion is that I like the ends of sliced bread.
No.
Yes.
Like, if you see the whole loaf, you will take the ends.
You know what's weird is that, like, well, no, I'll eat the middles, but like every once in a while I'm like, you know what? I really want a piece of that end. And then I'll and then I'll toast it and I'll eat it.
Because it's like
no, go. If you think about it, it's like it fits perfectly in the palm of your hand because it's curved slightly and it's not a full slice. It's like a half slice. Brittany looks so disgusted right now in what I'm saying.
Do you just like cradle bread from the palm of your hand? Like, you don't hold it with your fingers when you're eating toast, or hold it
when I'm like spreading bread,
Oh, I did.
Like, when I'm spreading like butter, peanut butter, or like whatever, it's like it fits perfectly in the palm of my hand for me to spread that thick layer of chunky peanut butter that I like.
Wait, so you're saying you would take the end off a loaf of bread, take out the whole entire loaf of the bag, to get the other end of the bread?
No, I'll just cut another hole. I'm kidding. I don't do that.
That's good.
I
Look at
don't do
you.
that. I don't do that. I'm kidding.
But would you? Okay, you
No, I
don't, but do you
wouldn't.
want to?
No, but like when like you get to a certain number of slices, it kind of like tumbles over because it's no longer in that loaf form. Then it's like easier to get it.
Oh, I see.
Like,
so you
I
still
won't
reach back there.
Well, if there's like 3 or 4 slices left,
It's like up to her bicep, her hand in the bag.
it's the full bag. I just go and grab it.
Do you think it tastes better, or so the full thing of why you like it is because it fits very well in your hand?
It fits, and it's not like. Sometimes I don't want to eat 2 slices of bread, but I don't want 1, so it's like a 1.5.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Well, that's the first time
Brittany
I've heard
shook
that.
her head no.
Unpopular opinion.
Great.
My unpopular opinion, I didn't even know it was unpopular until I was just, at my college with my laptop out. And people would see that I would use iCal religiously. And they would just get so offended that I wasn't using Gcal or Google Calendar. But
Okay, but I
like
can see
using
that
iCal
though. No,
for the
I can
aesthetic.
totally get that. Oh. I don't know about well, okay. I can see that though, as like someone who has a MacBook and an iPhone. I can see why it is useful, especially if someone like our school didn't have a Gmail. It had an Outlook,
Exactly.
which makes sense for me. But that's also coming from someone who also uses iCal. Sorry.
Yeah.
But you know what's weird though
now
is that I use iCal and I subscribe to my Gcal.
Same. I do that. Yep.
My events get added to the Gcal, but I use the iCal interface.
Yeah. Because I have my iCal calendar.
Right.
I have like Eric, my partner's calendar, also in mine, or like I could click in and see it.
Yeah.
I have like my 2 works calendars, which is like Outlook or Gmail, and I just sync it all to iCal. So iCal is like the hub where I can see everything, and it just looks so nice, and I could like change the colors.
Brittany is like wincing. She's frowning. She does not like this at all.
No, the one part I was floored by with Google Calendars is I put an appointment for a haircut and they give a little cartoon of a haircut. I was like, this is
that's true.
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they do little things too, like brunch. They'll do like a little, brunch spread looking cartoon. It's just so aesthetically nice.
I mean, I don't need those cartoons.
So what's the point?
No,
You just
I'm
said
joking.
iCal is aesthetic, Kimmy.
Okay, I understand. When I did use Gcal for my work and I saw those little icons, I thought they were nice.
So to start off the conversation or the topic of politics in today's episode, I'm curious to know, when was the first time that you remember or recall being either involved or more involved in politics?
I was trying to remember a specific moment because I knew I had one. And what just crossed my mind is like after the presidential election of 2016, around campus, there was a bunch of protests that were happening. And that was like the first time where I was like, okay, first of all, let's rewind. The night of the election was just a mess, right? Everyone thought Hillary had it in the bag, which just wasn't true. And then the day after, like the campus was like mourning basically this decision, or I guess election that had happened. And some students started to organize, protesting against the election and against the president. I found it to be very cathartic to just be alongside the other people who shared my same beliefs and just kind of like yell out in anger to the world what I felt. So yeah, I guess that was first year when I felt like I was politically inspired.
That was your first year? Oh, I guess that was your first
year.
That was our sophomore.
So it was a rough.
Wow.
That's what people say, like the class of 2020 had it rough because we got into school and the election happened. We left school. Coronavirus.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait,
mine is actually.
Sorry.
similar to Kimi, actually. I think my first time that I remember being involved in politics was also my first year, so 2015. And it was also a protest. There was a Black Lives Matter protest at our campus because
Mm.
one of the deans at one of the colleges
Mhm.
that we were at basically told, I believe it was a Black student, that they didn't fit the
Mhm.
mold.
Mm.
And that sparked some outrage, obviously, because they were like, what mold are you talking about?
Mhm.
And I can't fully remember exactly, yeah, what mold were you talking about? And so they organized a protest, and I remember that I went to it, and so that was my first time being involved in politics.
Nice.
So I feel I kind of got more interested in politics and current events, I would say my senior year of high school. I started reading more news articles to prepare for college interviews. Um,
Oh.
Oh,
yeah.
smart.
So, but one thing I think was interesting was I think a lot of my political views became more, I would say, refined in college during my participation in the same organization that we all met in. It was a program to mentor Asian American students at our school.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mhm.
I remember there's this case that came up where it was a Chinese officer who killed a black man and is in New York, and there's so many protests about it. And I remember in high school is the officer's name was Peter Liang.
Mm.
The in high school I remember thinking like, there's so much injustice for Peter Liang. He's such a scapegoat.
Mhm.
Like white officers don't get prosecuted for this. But
Mm.
I remember talking about it in that program for that training week, and it became more nuanced in the sense that I thought these ways because of internalized anti-blackness and just
Mm.
different factors
Mhm.
that I never really thought about. And so, yeah, I think that was when I first kind of became exposed to um, more nuanced political topics and ways of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. That's cool that your perspective shifted over
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, it was just so it was really interesting because I remember feeling very cool and being like, oh, I have strong political beliefs
Mhm.
and like knowing about current events back in high
Mm-hmm.
school, but then
Mhm.
like coming to the realization that maybe those perspectives weren't um fully flushed out and I wasn't
Mm.
addressing all aspects that I could have when approaching that very political topic at the time.
Yeah.
Mhm. So all of us had a little bit of a different experience going from college and then either moving back home or going somewhere new. But specifically, I was wondering how is that transition from college to home in regards to talking about difficult subjects with your parents, with coworkers, with friends that you might now disagree with. Specifically referring to the fact that our political climate has become super polarizing since Donald Trump has been elected. So it seems like it's been a lot harder, at least for me, to navigate conversations because just some people's beliefs I strongly disagree with. And I feel like, in a way, they're just attacking who I am. So I was wondering if you feel similarly or how that transition has been for you.
I think for me, I'm lucky enough that the place where I work has very similar views to my own in terms of politics specifically. So so I haven't had to have too many conversations there. But at the same time, it's tricky because it is a workplace and you want to keep things professional. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess the ongoing struggle for a lot of companies is how do we provide a space, if we even want to, for employees to talk about these issues, because it is important and is a part of our lives and they shouldn't be ignored. But how do we also maintain professionalism?
Mm-hmm.
How do we maintain professionalism?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
I understand that. I recently started at a new company, and it's like, of course, hard to gauge what the political climate is, especially remote. And they're based in the East Coast, which is like, I mean, just different than being in a company that's like in San Francisco, where definitely probably leans to being liberal. But literally, like yesterday, there are like yesterday there was one of the biweekly allyship and action events. And I guess these are events where like employees talk about culture or basically anything where like they believe people should be allies to or for. So this like event in particular was like Hispanic and Latinx heritage. And I like didn't know anything really going into it because I've only been working there for 2 weeks. But I was like bracing myself for someone to say something problematic. And luckily no one did. But I was just like, oh my gosh, I just felt so anxious the whole time because, you know, if someone did say something problematic, I would want to respond naturally. But within the work environment and within like
Right.
30 people on Google Hangouts, is that the right thing to do? I don't know. And like there was this one question that one of the employees asked where it was like, how can we be better allies? Something I really wanted to discuss is that I feel like, yes, you can be an ally and like being a good friend or having more diverse friends, but really, like, to me, allyship is also done more through actions, like politically, like choosing policies that are going to help people in minority communities. And so I wanted to bring up something like, oh, I felt like in a way I was a bad ally because I felt like I didn't necessarily understand like the impact that ICE had until I watched the documentary on Netflix about Immigration Nation. And I was like, that was so moving to me. And that really helped me understand what these people are going through. But one, I don't know if this is actually representative of these immigrants' experiences. Like, no one that I know who has family members or friends that have been affected by this has like reviewed it. So I feel like I can't necessarily claim it to be very credible. But also, too, I didn't know if that would be too political to say that I am against ICE and what is happening in those communities.
I think it's really great, Kimmy, that your workplace has a biweekly meeting or discussion for allies. That's something that my workplace also does. We have different Slack channels for discussions and how to be better allies, which is something that I've really appreciated. And even though I'm not particularly vocal in those channels, it's something that I like to kind of occasionally read through to see what other people are talking about. So it's nice for me, at least. I feel really lucky that the place that I work is a place that has similar views to my own, where I do feel in ways like supported by my beliefs and feeling like I can talk about certain topics that I may not feel as comfortable talking about in other places.
Definitely. Actually, a conversation that I had with Eric the other day was similar to this topic. So I'd be curious to learn your perspectives. Like, I had an experience before where one of my work environments, like, literally did not touch on these topics. And I thought that in a way that was almost worse than having some sort of discussion or having at least the majority of people agree with like what progressives agree with. Um, so I was just wondering, like, what type of environment do you think you would be happier in? One where there's no discussion at all, or one where like there is a discussion, but a majority of the discussion aligns with your beliefs?
Or I guess a third option is a place where there is a discussion, but people don't align with your beliefs, right?
That's true.
I guess for me, probably the second option where we have a space for this discussion. There is a room to talk about these political issues, social issues, and so forth, where people agree with. But I think that also is on a scale. Like someone could agree with you to a certain extent, but not completely. And I think that that still allows for growth and for good discussions because say you think one way of, like, say you and another person both have generally more or less the same view. If there's a
Mhm.
specific particular point that you disagree with, you could talk about that. But I definitely do think it's, for me, I would be happier in a place discussing this than in a place that like never touched on it and pretended that it didn't exist and that it wasn't a factor at all.
Mhm.
So personally, I'm currently, I would categorize my workplace as the first one where there's pretty much
Mhm.
zero discussion about political topics. And I have to say, not to say I prefer it, but I'm quite content with it just because, Kimmy, like you said earlier, I feel when people disagree with my political views, I take it very personally and I react very intensely, which I know would not fly in a professional workplace.
Mhm.
Um, Also, I think my workplace is very small, and so there isn't really not a lot of initiative to kind of teach these kind of values and topics in such a when it's like 9 people. Um,
Mhm.
and I think there is a part of me from my younger self back in college when I was very involved in activism and engaging in topics about social justice and more politicized topics. There's a part of me that kind of feels guilty that I'm fine with people. I'm fine with going day to day without talking about those things just because I think those topics would be very difficult to have with the type of work environment I have because I just know
Mhm.
that the people would more or less disagree how with my own opinions. And
Mhm.
I don't know, that's just something that's I've kind of reflected on because I think to some degree I really feel like I'm not enacting the same type of activism that I was such an advocate for when I was in
Mhm.
college. But at the same time, I don't know, I feel like I couldn't do much for these people at my work. I don't think I'm the best person to change their mind about these things just because I know how I carry on conversations about more difficult or controversial topics. So, yeah, that's just something I've been kind of mulling in the fact that I am in this very apolitical atmosphere and able to
Mhm.
thrive. And I haven't really come to terms with that with my past self of in college when it was something that was such a big part of my daily life.
Mhm. I mean, I definitely understand that in a work setting, it is really hard to be political because, like, we're all entry level, and like these people
Mm-hmm.
basically have the power to fire us if they want to. And like, yes, it's
Yeah.
illegal to fire on political beliefs, but like, technically, there could be some other like rationale that people use to get you fired. Okay, I'm not in HR, but this is what I'm assuming that it would work. Um, or like not even get fired, just not treat you as well as they did previously without knowing your beliefs. Like maybe just something as small as like not assigning you the best projects
Mm-hmm.
or like prioritizing you after other people.
Mm-hmm. But
Mhm.
like the idea of punishing you for speaking up
Exactly.
or for saying certain things that maybe don't align with other people.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a speaker that I heard at school once, and he said something along the lines of politics start in your immediate circle. So if you're not doing your best to kind of educate and um, so if you're not doing your best to try to educate those people closest to you, and by that I think
Mm-hmm.
he meant primarily family, but I think that can apply to friends and coworkers, then you're
Mm-hmm.
not really doing your job as an activist or someone who's actually cares about social justice. And so I'm just curious, like, what you two think about that, especially because I think the people close to me, are a good number of them, are just so stuck in their ways. Like, I don't know how to have conversations with people who I feel like I can do whatever I do isn't going to change their mind about certain topics.
Like, I haven't yet had any experience of where someone like heavily disagrees with me. Like, I've had some experience where it's like slight, but we still agree on like core issues. So in a way, having those conversations has been easier because there's at least like one unifying belief. But I understand what you're saying because I definitely know like, or I definitely can understand where if you're trying to have conversations with some person and it's just not getting through to them, at what point like should you stop in order to like salvage that relationship? Because, you know, assuming that like they are a family member, someone close to you, I would assume that you treasure that relationship and wouldn't want it to be broken through like talking about politics.
I think these conversations or discussions with family is in ways more difficult than with friends. At least for me growing up, I didn't really talk about politics, social issues with my family. Whereas I feel like with friends, it comes up more because I guess the friends that I am with, I've in ways like I'm friends with them because I have the same beliefs and views as them. So it's a lot easier to talk to them because I know that's where they stand. And even with coworkers, because I know we have like I guess my point is like it's easier for me to talk about have these conversations with people where I know where they stand politically, socially. But I don't know. But going beyond that, the conversation gets a little bit more difficult where it's a decision to, yeah, where it's hard because I don't know if it's at what point do I stop trying to convince them or trying to, it's not convince, but like to show them a different perspective.
Yeah, Annalise, I feel similarly to you. I feel like I normally have political skewed conversations with people I'm close to in terms of similar views. But I don't know, I feel like I've always had a sense of guilt or just thought that maybe I was somewhat performative in my activism when it came to having a conversation with someone I really disagreed with. Like, of course, it's easy to have conversations with people who support you and kind of just build up your ideas. But when it comes to having difficult conversations, I kind of shy away from that. And I was wondering if you, or if you, Kimmy, too, felt like you're not doing enough because I'm assuming, Kimmy, you also have a lot of conversations with people who have similar views.
I guess for me, one thing that I try to do before having these conversations is I try to educate myself first because it's not efficient if you go into a conversation with someone who disagrees with you and both of you are just kind of saying your opinion rather than stating facts or having things to back up your arguments. And especially because if the thing that they say is something that's like super, I'm trying to think of an example, like
but also, Annalise, do you find yourself when you're looking for facts, you're just looking for things to confirm yourself,
to back
right?
up my yeah.
Yeah, I realize I do that too.
But yeah, it's like hard because if I were to find facts that didn't go with what I aligned with, or to actively find those articles or those sources. I feel like that it would just kind of enrage me or rile me up, that it's like, why would I actively see this thing that will disagree with my own opinions and like get me all riled up when I could not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why would I put myself through that emotional labor?
Right.
I mean, I think the hard thing now is like, yes, the US is becoming more polarized, especially on the ideas of facts. And something that Eric, my partner, mentioned a few days ago is like, even facts and like where you get them from can be so political. So, like, you could bring up something from like a science journal, right? And someone could literally say, I don't believe in that resource. Like, I believe in Fox News. Like, I've never personally had this experience, but I could see that happening just because there like are different institutions that have these values that might not be the values that you align with.
Yeah, I've had someone tell me that science is political after I would think I was talking about, like, I was either talking about coronavirus or climate change, and they were like, science is political. I'm
Oh,
like,
I
are you
see
serious
that.
right now?
As a way to like kind of
To like
explain why
not
they
really
were.
listen to what I had to
Oh my
say.
gosh.
Yeah, I think it's so
Yeah.
easy to like dismiss people that don't agree with me uh, just by saying like they're just not correct. Like I find myself doing that too.
Yeah.
Like I think it's easy for me, especially to say to family members, "Oh, you got that from Fox News." Like that's 100% incorrect. I'm not even going to listen to you at this point. And
Right.
I don't know, I know that's such an unproductive way to go about it, but at the same time, I don't know what else to do when like that's what they believe and this is what I believe. And
Exactly.
if there's no common ground, even when it comes to science, like what like how does
Yeah.
that come into play?
I guess so. When I think of like difficult conversations, because we haven't really fully clarified that, it's in my head, what I go to is like the kind of conversation about Black Lives Matter that I had with my family members. And that was a tough one because one of my family members, they kind of had like the argument that I feel like a lot of us have seen on news, like, or the internet, where it's like, oh, they had it coming, or oh, if only he hadn't struggled, if only he complied. And I'm talking about like George Floyd specifically. You're like, oh, if only George Floyd complied to the police, or oh, he had a fake bill, so he was a criminal. And it's just frustrating. But I find that in those situations, what I found to be most productive was to kind of let them finish and let them fully explain their process of like their thinking, and then it would then give me a chance to respond, but not in a way that I'm attacking them. Like I find like if you attack someone, they get extremely defensive, and it just ends up becoming like a huge argument about you're wrong, no, you're wrong, as opposed to like, okay, let's take a step back. You said this, that's a good point, but, and then you kind of give them a response in that way. And I found that type of conversation to be more productive. And it takes, and I'm not saying like you have one conversation and you're done, because it will keep coming back. And in my case, it has keep coming back. And it at a certain point, it does get frustrating because I'm trying so hard to like keep calm and like give them a chance to speak and then kind of then respond. But then at a certain point, it's like, listen, we're having the same argument over and over and over again. At what point will we move on or come to an agreement? And so it's challenging, but I found that like, trying to keep calm and listening to what they say, and then giving your side and, backing it up with facts or with other sources helps a lot. And then to have this conversation ongoing rather than, have it be one and done. Because you can't really wrap everything up in one conversation either.
So, in my eyes, it seems like this conversation was successful in the fact that it's like continuous. Like, there's been other moments since then where you've continued to discuss this thing. But do you think it is successful? And like, also, did it impact your relationship at all with this person?
I don't really think it was successful. I
Okay.
think only because I mean, because it is ongoing, right? And it's not like
Yeah,
something that they openly received,
that's
which
true.
was been hard. And now, whenever this conversation comes up again,
Mm-hmm.
things are a little tense in my
Mm-hmm.
household.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also feel like success is hard to measure because, at least
Yeah.
for me,
That's true.
especially, well, with more nuanced problems, I think it's hard to define success as like something between did I prove my point? Do you understand that I'm right here? Or
Or do you actually understand and now believe or have similar beliefs, right?
yeah, or like how we come to the same conclusion of like
Mm-hmm.
the ideals that we're talking about here. And more often than
Mm-hmm.
not, I do admit I think I don't measure anything as successful past.
Yeah.
Do you agree with me? And do you know why I'm
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe it's like a I don't know, a reimagination or like redefining of our idea of success. Because I do agree that Britt, I'm like either all or nothing.
Mm,
But maybe it's just like that both sides actually understand where each other are coming from.
mhm.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like
I know, but I feel like it's so easy to also be like, okay, I know where you're coming from, but it's wrong. Like,
Yeah.
I
that's so
understand why
true.
you think this way, but you shouldn't think this way.
So far we've talked a lot about speaking with family members or coworkers with things based in politics. Um, but I know like at least growing up, I just hear this saying like, oh, it's taboo to discuss
Mm-hmm.
things like politics, religion, or money.
Mm-hmm.
But from my perspective, it seems like as we've gotten older, maybe it's just like us growing up or the environment that we're now growing up in. I feel like these things are talked about all the time.
Mm.
So do
Mm-hmm.
you think that that is, I mean, I think it's pretty productive, but would you agree with that? Or what are your general thoughts on this kind of cultural norm shifting?
I think so. I think it is good because it's in ways like it has to be talked about. You can't ignore. I'm speaking
Exactly.
again specifically like politics. Like you can't ignore politics and
Mm-hmm.
social issues. Like this is what's happening
Yeah,
in your life, in your community, and it affects so many people around you that you can't
exactly.
ignore it. It's a privilege to ignore it that
Mm.
I think you need to address. And especially as
Mm-hmm.
adults, you have to like understand your impact and your influence, and you can't not have an opinion anymore. I feel like
Mm.
Yeah.
Why do you think that was? Just so people wouldn't fight at the dinner table?
or we're talking about money or
Or like politics,
oh,
or like more
I think
just
so.
taboo topics
Yeah.
in general. Mm.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Fair.
so.
I don't know.
Well, I think I also wonder if it's like that whole idea of like that perfect family of like a husband, a wife, a son, and a daughter. You know what I'm talking about?
The
Like that
nuclear
perfect,
family.
yeah, the perfect American nuclear family. And they
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to tarnish that image by having people argue or have conversations surrounding disagreeing viewpoints.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. I just want is like it's kind of sad how that's so rooted in the fact
Mm-hmm.
that it's just people know it's gonna end up in an argument or some sort
Yeah,
of non-productive
that's true.
conversation.
Yeah.
So,
But I had someone tell me that like it's those types of people and conversation. It's in those situations where you know it's going to be tough is where you need to have the conversations the most.
mhm.
Because everyone can like
For
very
sure.
easily talk to someone who agrees with you and be like, "Yeah, don't you agree?" And they're like, "Oh, of course." But
Mm-hmm.
it's when you talk to someone that you don't agree with and it's really difficult. I feel like especially if there's someone close to you, I feel like that's
Mm-hmm.
something that you those are the topics that need to those are the conversations that need to be had.
Mm.
But I guess Brittany or Kimmy, what are your thoughts about the whole shift in talking about taboo topics?
I guess for me, I don't know, maybe it's because I don't remember because I was younger, but I don't remember like that being an off-topic conversation. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but
By
I
that, what do you mean? specifically?
I don't remember my family avoiding talking about politics when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really remember what they would talk about.
I will say though, like after having some of these tough conversations with my family, there have been times where they've come up to me and they're like, "Hey, thanks for telling me your side." And it's yeah, and it's like it for me, I'm like, "Oh, thanks for listening," because it feels productive in that sense. And something that like my parents have said to me is like, "Hey, you've really grown up." And oh, I'm getting emotional. they're like they're like, "You've really grown up." And and
I'm
we're
gonna cry
like
now. No,
I was like getting my period. So
no, I can't watch
What's
people cry.
happening?
I'll cry too.
This is through Zoom.
Yeah, my parents have said like, "Oh, you've really grown up," and like we're really glad to have these conversations with you now because I guess growing up, like when you're a kid, yeah, it's important to like instill these ideas or like to teach them about the injustices in the world that's happening as a kid. My parents have told me like since growing up, they're really proud of like me forming my own opinions and being able to talk to them about politics and social issues. And we've definitely had more conversations now than when I was growing up.
Yeah, and I just like still wonder how much of that is rooted in like today's political climate or us growing up, because I remember when I was in school, my younger brother is like 3 years younger than me. And since it was during the time when things were shifting, my parents would talk about like the election or Donald Trump in a negative way all the time. So like my younger brother had these ideals and like he would talk about it like as if it was his own. And I was like, wow, that's really great, because I didn't necessarily have that growing up. Also, it could just be like Gen Z because they're all very politically motivated. But yeah, I just like don't know how much of it is really attributed to the environment or just us growing up.
Yeah, I will say I feel like I was just more apt to have difficult or political based conversations growing up when I went to college and was able to kind of hold my own. And that's something I've kind of have a complicated relationship, I feel like, because especially with my family members that I don't agree with, one defense tactic I often use is like classroom talk, and by that I feel like it's like I'm using very big words. I'm using
for sure.
Terms and phrasing things in a way that makes it very difficult for my first generation family members to understand. It's very complicated because the reason I'm able to have these conversations and speak the way I can through my education is because my family obviously supported me to go to college and get the education I was able to graduate with. And so yeah, it's kind of really complicated because like I'm kind of using things I just knew that they didn't have access to in order to make my point, which I don't know, to a certain degree I'm like, what's kind of the point if my experiences wouldn't have been possible without their work and like their struggles.
Yeah.
No, I think you bring up a really good point though, because I think we do come from a privileged background of being able to go to college and get an education, and specifically a liberal arts college where we were immersed in this environment where we were given the opportunities to have like these resources and these conversations to help educate us. It's something that I've thought about too, like in terms of where I stand versus where my parents stand, because they didn't have that same privilege that I have. And so it's something that I think about when I have political conversations with my parents, because I have to understand where they're coming from before I go in and no, I don't want to say attack, but like attack their viewpoint. But yeah. But King, I'm curious then, like how what your background is and or your
Mm-hmm.
experiences, because you did mention that your parents have similar viewpoints to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think it's like I guess like that's where I differ between you two. We're gonna go more in depth on like race and our backgrounds in another episode, but just to give some background of myself, I'm like mixed Asian and Mexican, and on all sides, I'm like a myriad of different generations, but not first generation. So I think because of that, because my parents were born here and like understand American politics and culture really well, we do align on like a lot of the same things. So that's made, I don't know, this whole time being at home really easy because something like bad in the world will happen and I'll be like, wow, that's kind of shitty, right? But like I know that there's other family members that don't necessarily have those beliefs. And I haven't yet like approached these discussions with them because I feel like a lot of it is like the core belief that I just don't align with. Like I'm not necessarily a religious person by any means. And like religion just can be very like the end all be all for some people, which I think can be helpful in like life for people. But I think when it informs people's decisions so much to the point where I disagree on something like abortion or like appointing Amy Coney Barrett to like the Supreme Court, like I can't necessarily, I feel like if someone is so rooted in their ideas of religion guiding their life in like every aspect, I can't necessarily say, well, I think abortion is bad for these reasons because like my reasons are not going to triumph theirs by any means.
That's interesting.
So how was this week for you two and how do you feel now knowing that Joe Biden is the president in 2021? So going into this week, we basically knew that it was going to be a very long process just because of the mail-in ballots and because the overwhelming amount of people that had already voted. Like I think in some states it was even higher than the previous election. But I had no idea that it was going to take this long, like almost a week to find out the results. But something that I felt to be very comforting was that the week before the election, my manager like texted us and was saying like, oh, you should go ahead and make sure that you're voting on Tuesday. Like, feel free to take some time out of your day to do that. And also like, she didn't say that she was for a certain party or not, but she was just saying like, I'm personally going to be distracted this week by the election, so it's understandable if you are. And I thought that that was very helpful to know. Like all of us did work, we did get our things done, but just to have that sort of emotional support.
Yeah, the same kind of sentiment was echoed at my workplace. I think it was just kind of understood that no one was really going to get a lot of work done today or the whole week. And I think that it was a really long week and it felt like it was never ending, honestly. And I think like a lot of things that I've seen is people questioning like, why was this process so long to begin with? Like people thought it was going to be a landslide. So why was it that the race was so close? There's been a lot of things I think on social media just about how people have viewed this election and the results of this election, both good and bad. People are saying like, okay, clearly this is our democracy working because we're counting every single vote and we're letting people, we're making sure that everyone's voice is heard through their ballot. But the other sentiment is that this race was extremely close and it in ways was almost, I don't really think, well, I don't want to say more divisive, but it was because it was really clear which side you were on. And one sentiment that I kind of saw was like, if the fact that there were so many Trump supporters still and people who voted for Trump should be a telling sign of where we are as a country. And you know, people have been saying like, if you know someone who voted for Trump, or if you know someone who's a Trump supporter, you should just cut them out of your life, because they're basically, in ways, I think the idea is that they're supporting someone who is just so morally wrong that I think that it's been really divisive and polarizing, just to see how close the election was. And like, yeah, people are really excited, and I'm really excited, but in a way people are exhausted, I think, just like by how long this process took.
Yeah, and how long it feels like it's going to take, like,
yeah,
perhaps lawsuits or I don't know.
Lawsuits, recounts.
Exactly.
Yeah, and Lisa, touch on what you said about people, I think, cutting out people who supporters of Trump. I really think that's not a one size fits all solution to things. Yeah, if you want to cut out people in your life who do support Trump and that serves you well, I feel like that's great to do. But I also think you shouldn't castigate people who don't have that luxury of doing so. And it's hard because even that stance, I feel like, is divisive. And
yeah,
this opinion right now is against a lot of people's opinion. And that just really speaks to how it's very black and white, how things are set out. And if you're not on one side, you're automatically against the other. Like, there's no nuance to things. And so I think that's been really hard to navigate during this time.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. Like, some people, they just cannot cut them. They don't have that luxury to just cut people out of their lives. Like, these are people who might be your parents, your cousins, your nieces, your kids. Like, it's not always going to be super easy to do.
Yeah, even like your coworkers, your boss, like those are, like, you can't cut those people out of your lives if you're working with them, right? Which makes sense, and like why politics might not be discussed in the workplace. But yeah, it is unfortunate that there is that rhetoric that's going around right now, because it in a way almost feels like it's ignorant and like not understanding that there are other factors that play into relationships outside of your political beliefs. And
Well,
also I think
keep going, sorry.
I also think that there sometimes is like a misunderstand, like, I'm in no way defending Trump supporters, but I think there's sometimes a misunderstanding in politics in general. Like, if you support Biden, you support all of his policies, and same goes with Trump, when that's not necessarily the case. Like, I think a lot of times people just pick and choose in what they like in candidates and choose to ignore the rest. And I think just seeing this week how the states still are really divided is just a sign in that our government has failed to help so many people. Like, you can even think about it on like an educational basis. Like, if people that are blue are ones that tend to be more educated, then maybe this is because like people also aren't being educated about these beliefs and why it is important to have something like healthcare for all, or to not be racist, like these are simple things to us, but if you haven't gotten exposure to it, then how can we expect people to understand?
I think the other sentiment that I've been seeing is that like those who vote for Trump, again, not saying that I support any Trump supporters, but that they are basically, the argument is that like you're saying that his racist actions, his sexist actions, like all of his moral issues are not a deal breaker for you, and that it says a lot about your character, not even necessarily like about your political beliefs, but about the fact that you yourself cannot set that as a deal breaker.
So this all makes me think about there's this Christian lesson or ideal that essentially you would think that the quote unquote good Christian would be the one that's so pure that does nothing wrong, when in reality it's better to have experienced challenges to your faith or experience the temptation of the other side, but still choose to go back to what you think is right. And so I think this is really applicable to this political climate, in that I don't think it's the right thing to surround yourself with people who just solely agree with you. I think it's healthy to have people that kind of challenge your beliefs, and bring different point of views, because that just reaffirms you going back to what you really believe in. Really just reaffirms you actually, wholeheartedly believe in these things and want to make change. And so I feel like, Annalise, when you're talking about cutting people off, that people who take that to such an extreme, I think, I don't want to judge their reasoning for it, but there's a certain level of privilege to that, in that they're able to just surround themselves with people that just reaffirm what they believe in. In that sense, you're not making change. You're not necessarily bringing the good ideals that you stand for to other people. And I feel like that's really important now, because what are we going to do going forward? Like, yeah, Biden's president, but there's people who still wholeheartedly want Donald Trump to be president. And like, what are you going to do? Just not talk to these people forever for the rest of your life? Even, when the next Republican nominee isn't Donald Trump, like, are you just going to hold that against people like your entire life? I don't know. That's just something that's just kind of not productive to me, I guess.
Yeah, I think what's like especially challenging is that like someone like Trump he is just so morally wrong. Like, he's super racist, he's super sexist, he is super anti a lot of things that people automatically associate anyone who's Republican to that exact same viewpoint, when that is not true. Like, not all Republicans are racist, not all Republicans are sexist, but that is what Trump has made it seem like, which is super divisive. And I think that that's something that, just navigating these political conversations, and to, like you were mentioning, Brittany, if you're really like someone who believes in these things, if you have like the ability to, you should try to show someone like the right side of stuff. Like, you should tell them and like teach them why racism is bad. Like, you shouldn't just like cut them out and just let them live that way. Like, I think that that's something that we also need to think about as well.
Yeah.
But I will say, I feel like there are instances where it is totally justifiable to cut out certain people.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't want to say it's a bad thing. I think it's just not the cure-all solution.
Yeah, I saw somewhere earlier today where it was like, it's not even about Democrats versus Republicans. It's Democrats, Republicans, and then there's Trump. Like, be a Republican and not believe in any of Trump's like moral, or like agree with anything that he says, but you can still believe in, like, I don't know, like his tax policies or whatever, but to still completely disagree with him as a person. So
is that justifiable though?
Well, not justifiable, but like, there is now, I feel like it's not even a two-party system, it's just a three-party system.
I see.
Like, Trump and then Democrats and Republicans.
I mean, you could also, I just feel like just having the two parties is really limiting, and like,
yeah, it is,
who we can actually elect into office, because even though the blue party, the Democratic Party right now, is the most progressive it's been, it's still very moderate. And like
there's a lot of
exactly, and like a lot of liberals were settling for Biden this year. So it's just like, I don't know, it's just kind of frustrating that it is set up this way.
Yeah. My mom has a theory that things work better in threes anyway. So she's like, there should be a third party, like a triangle, because it's like,
there is the Green Party,
more balanced. Well, yeah, but
I know, it's just too bad.
Yeah. But in I guess in other news, we have our first female vice president.
Yes.
Ever.
It's exciting.
And person of color, vice president.
And person of color, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
She's Madam. She's not Madam Vice President.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is really exciting. I think it was definitely, I don't know if it was radical, but it was pretty cool when Biden said that his vice president was going to be a woman. And he declared that pretty early on. And just like looking through, I think there's 8 people that he was considering, and all of them were very qualified. And then he did end up picking Kamala, which I know initially in the liberal or progressive community, there was some maybe like, what's the word? Not hatred. Something
Controversy?
back. Oh yeah. And there was some initial controversy around that, which I do agree that like no politician is great and that they can't necessarily fulfill all of our needs. But I do think that having a woman vice president can be very impactful on our nation. And I know something that she discussed was, I think it was a CNN interview, and the interviewer asked her like, about her like race and being a woman and how that would play into being in politics. And she answered the question saying like, yes, I am these things, but I'm not necessarily like limited by my label. Like I am just like Kamala, and I am going to bring all of these experiences with me to the White House. But I think what is going to be most important for me being in this position of power is that there will be some representation, and young children will be able to look up to me and see that's what I want to be, and it is achievable, rather than having this history that we've had of all cis white males in the White House.
Yeah, I'm excited that, we have more representation in the White House. I guess my fear now is that a lot of people are going to only view her as a woman, as a woman of color, and not really care about the things that she does, or like just view her as just, a politician or like a human, but just only see her as a woman of color and like always use that narrative. Which I mean, like, yeah, okay, representation, but like she's not limited to that label.
Yeah. You don't say like white male Joe Biden.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's do that.
46th white male to be not 46th, 45th white
45th,
male to be elected. Yeah. Because that is so true. Like just reading my notifications this morning, everyone was like, "Oh yay, Joe Biden! Joe Biden's elected."
Yeah.
Then afterwards, they trickled in Kamala Harris, the first Black woman, the first Asian woman.
Yeah. I mean, like, it is exciting that she's the first, but like that shouldn't just be her narrative.
Exactly. Hopefully it'll progress over time.
So to conclude, we're going to go in our segment where we just talk about some advice or reflections we have that we talked about from this episode. So, Annalise, what are some things you'd like to leave our audience with?
Yeah, I think electing Biden and Harris to be in the White House is a step in the right direction, but it doesn't stop there. I think a lot of people, they voted and they think that they are done. I don't think you should stop there. I think you should continue to be political and continue to be involved in your community and be involved in politics. But just to continue to learn and continue to participate and to be involved.
Yeah, for me, I feel like enacting your beliefs can look a wide variety of ways, and either way doesn't necessarily reflect, I guess, the intensity of how much you care about it. So like maybe if cutting off someone just to sustain yourself and take care of your own needs is what's needed to do, I don't think that you're automatically giving up on trying to prove your point and therefore, enacting your ideals. And on the flip side, I think it's okay to push your ideals on people, and it's okay to not come to a direct conclusion at the end of that. And both are equally representative of your passions and your beliefs.
Yeah, I think this past week was really cool to see so many people like keeping up with politics, even internationally. I know people were looking at the US election. Um, but I think it's a moment like this where we are so American, and that I feel like people that I know that aren't necessarily politically motivated, this like week they were paying attention to the TV screen 24/7.
Mhm.
So I think beyond elections like this, it's important to be aware of just what's happening day to day in the world, outside of the US as well. So,
Mhm.
like, what I want to definitely do is I felt very politically motivated in this election, but I think in upcoming elections or even local elections, I also want to like educate myself more on like educate myself more on what's happening, and just have that same passion that I did have for this 2020 election.
Mhm.
Mhm. So thank you all for listening, and thank you for all of your sweet comments and participation with us through our social media. If you can, we would really appreciate it if you were able to give us a review on Apple Podcasts. That just really helps our recognition. And you can follow us at Adulthood Pending Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and LinkedIn, or Adult Pending Pod on Twitter. You could also send us an email to hello.adulthoodpendingpodcast@gmail.com. Join us every other Monday for new episodes. We can't wait to share our stories and are excited you're with us on our adulthood journey.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.